Hi, we're from Pomona High School, and today we'll be talking about Birches by Robert Frost. So with that, it sort of starts out with, obviously the topic's Birches. He's sort of talking about, like, what he sees in them, sort of the imagery that he sees, and he sort of, like, I think he personifies them to an extent, and he's sort of talking about how nature, he relates it to a boy, a boy's been, like, shaping them and, like, swinging on them.
So then, first serious question into that, if he's personifying the Birches, then obviously he's not meaning the Birches to be Birches. What is he actually, the word I'm looking for? What is he saying that the Birches are? What is he relating
What do they symbolize?
Yeah, what they symbolize. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just bring
got it.
out.
I didn't actually see a whole lot of symbolism in the trees. Maybe I just missed it, but I saw that he was just talking more like affectionately towards the trees, and so it was just trees.
I mean, in a way you could see like they're symbolizing beauty, but I think he's just talking more about their beauty themselves rather than saying that they themselves symbolize beauty.
Yeah, he's just sort of talking about nature as a larger symbol, but he's sort of focusing on this one aspect, and he's talking about what he sees in them. And then later on, he says, he says he thinks it looks like a boy who's bent them. He goes into a lot of imagery, and then he says, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about ice storms, I should prefer to have some boy bend them. So he's like, it may have been an ice storm that did this to him, but I sort of like my reality, like I can see something in him.
Like his idea about the boy is better than like real nature, like natural things. So like we have the boy who's doing it purposefully, but the nature, it would be totally accidental, and he likes that idea.
I personally think they symbolize his will, and the boy definitely symbolizes something that is trying to bend or break it, and I think that he prefers that over saying an ice storm, which is much harsher, honestly, and it's kind of like the difference between like a persuasive matter or like a harsh matter trying to break his will.
Yeah, I think sort of the boy maybe symbolizes something like within him. Maybe it's like an actual story. He says like a boy from a small town. He sort of like plays with himself. He just sort of has to make everything up, and it's like he refers to it as subdued his father's trees. So maybe that's something.
What about down towards the bottom? He says that he always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup. No, not there. On the bottom of this page, like right there. Up to the brim and even above the brim. So I was thinking about that as being like in moderation, to have something that you want but not do everything you can to get it, because like you can't fill up a cup above the brim because like that's against nature.
No, you totally can. Have you guys ever filled up the cup, right? And there's that moment where you add just a little bit more and it makes that little rounded
That's
thing.
the surface tension of
Yes.
water because
Right.
they're polar
It's
molecules.
chemistry,
and they hold themselves
right? We are in AP Lit, but we're talking about chemistry. But that's what they're talking about, right? It's just that one moment where it's above the brim, but it hasn't gone over yet, right? And I think it's interesting that we're talking about the tree being symbolic of someone's will and that breaking, because this image is that same thing. There's that breaking point, right? Where we have this dome of water, and if we add any more, it's going to go over the side. But if we leave it there, it's perfect.
See, and I actually saw that there was a strong imagery of that.
Mr. Helen was just like,
Right.
I'm in here. But that's what I was, yeah. Definitely the imagery of that dome of like the breaking point. It's kind of weird that he used that in specific though, because like there are so many things that you can use for like the breaking point of my will, and he's just like, water.
Yeah.
Well, it could be because of almost like the juxtaposition, because water is typically seen as like calm and soothing or whatever, and then he flung outward feet first with a swish, which kind of is the complete opposite of calm and soothing. So,
Well, because when you think of going over that breaking point,
Right.
that's when everything is just like everywhere.
right.
It's when all peace
Yeah, it
ends.
kind of goes from the
Yeah.
peace to the sudden chaos.
So if you're talking about sort of a symbolic, the birches are like breaking like wills and then like bending. Later he says, I just had it. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. So like, what do you think you'd mean by that?
You know how you have kind of like those persuasive like people in your life who are always trying to like drag you one way or the other?
So like persuasive or manipulative? Like manipulative.
Either
Yeah,
way.
it's definitely like I think that's
It's-
more negative. You know, so it's like he's sort of like.
Well,
Is he
see,
trying to
like-
say it in a positive aspect or a negative?
Well, I think like in some ways he's saying it in a positive aspect. Like the boy, you definitely get positive connotations with it when he's saying he'd rather have someone swaying him like the boy than the ice storms. So it's up to your interpretation as to which one he would rather be. I think the boy, personally.
But could it be possible, since we go from the little boy to talking about him himself and his past experience, is it possible that the little boy is him?
I think he just wants to be that factor again.
Well, I think he's saying that the little boy like once was him, but not anymore, and he would like to go back to that. But like, what does he mean, being the little boy?
Yeah, what caused the shift away from the little boy?
Well, being the little boy is being that positive, like, factor that is kind of like persuading a person's will in or out. That's what the boy symbolizes, I think.
Well, with that, you could almost bring it into, it symbolizes youth almost, like all of that imagery. Like it could symbolize going from, being the boy and young and small, and then something happens and suddenly you're like, oh, I'm grown. I gotta get it together, man. Like I don't.
Right, like, almost to answer Drew's question with that is like, it's almost just growing up that happens,
Right.
being the boy, and you have to focus on yourself and your own, like, issues instead of, like, other people's goals
Right.
at that point.
It's like he's lost his sort of childish innocence. So it's like when he is looking at this boy or this boy is swinging, he's like, I used to be like that, but now I'm not because I'm growing up and I've seen all of these other things happen. So he's lost that part of himself.
Yeah, and so at the end here on the second page, he said he'd like to get away from Earth for a while, and he says like, don't misunderstand me, but it's like it is a great place, but like I think it's sort of lost that maybe magical feeling, like youth.
Right.
And then he comes back and he says, I like to go by climbing a birch tree, climb towards and then towards heaven till the tree could bear no more. So maybe, so he's talking about childhood in a way, sort of like that magical feeling that you get in childhood.
Love how he's like an American writer and he's like hinting towards reincarnation.
Let's go back to that line, though, that Dakota just talked about. It's line 54. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree. And let's look at the phrase, I'd like to go. Exactly,
He
right?
wants to climb up a tree.
Yes, he
have it
says,
snap.
yeah, like people say, I want to go in my sleep, right? No one says, I want to go in a big fiery car crash. No one says that, right? They say, I want to go in my sleep. So he says, I would like to go by climbing a birch tree. So now let's talk about this idea. He says, I want to die by climbing a birch tree.
Mic drop.
Mic drop, indeed. Like in relating that to the will of another. I think he wants to go out in that same almost innocence that he feels he's lost in order to gain it again.
Yeah, because like children climb birch trees, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the act of doing that is sort of like you die, but like while you're being a child again. I don't know.
It's like his life has gone full circle. So it's like he started being innocent, and then we all kind of go back to being like a baby when other people have to take care of us and do all of these things for us. So I feel like by wanting to climb the birch tree again, he wants to go back to that kind of people need to take care of me.
But is that saying that he wants to live until he's very old?
I don't know. What do you think? Does he want to live till he gets that old?
I mean, he has to be
Probably.
young enough and
I
spry
mean,
enough
'cause
to
it's
climb
not-
that tree.
Obviously.
But I mean, not if the tree's just a symbol for like having that, you know, childlike innocence in nature.
Okay. All right. Well, we are off like a turd hurdles. So, herd turtles. Herd turtles. So,
Turd hurdles.
herd turtles.